Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Conference on Religious Trauma 2023. I had the pleasure of interviewing our next speaker on the Divorcing Religion podcast, and I knew he would be a great fit for CORT. Willie Cartwright is a speaker, entrepreneur, author, and advocate who holds a B.S. degree in finance and an Executive MBA. His most recent book is entitled From Saved to Sane: My Journey Away from Christianity and How It Has Adversely Affected the African American Community. Today, Willie will be speaking about how Christianity has been detrimental to marginalized communities. Welcome, Willie Cartwright. It's so great to see you again.
Thank you. It is amazing to be here. And thank you so much, Janice, Sue, and the rest of the organization for putting this together. So I am indeed honored, and I am looking forward to this today. So I'll get started. First, thank you for all of you who've joined, and for those of you who will join later. Again, my name is Willie Cartwright, and my talk today would be on how Christianity has been detrimental to marginalized communities. And I want to begin by sort of telling you who I am, so you know who you're speaking to and who's speaking to you. As Janice said earlier, mentioned earlier, I am an educator, I'm an author, advocate. I'm a former Christian, and I am a student. From an educational standpoint, Janice mentioned a couple of my degrees. I do have a degree in finance, and I have an executive MBA. I'm currently working on a Master's of Science degree in religious studies at Georgia State University, where I also teach a group of a couple of classes, and they are undergrad religion, intro to religion classes. And I build a class as not something to deter you or even, it's not pro or con religion. It's more about using the class as a tool to teach my students about critical thought and critical thinking. And so that's sort of how I build the class. Obviously, we get into things about discussion, about religion, but it's an awesome class, a great group of young students who are eager and open to learn. And they've already said that I've changed their viewpoint on religion and being accepting of those of different religious beliefs or no religious belief at all. So that's been outstanding. Again, I'm an author. Janice mentioned my book earlier, Save the Same: My Journey Away from Christianity and Why I Think Christianity Has Been Detrimental to the African American Community. This book was a book that is personal to me. It is about my journey away from Christianity. I spent 40 plus years as a Christian, and in 2015 decided to walk away and embark on a wonderful, hopefully lifelong journey of understanding who I am, and particularly from the standpoint of what I believe and what I don't believe and what sort of works for me. My wife and I both sort of came to the conclusion sort of at the same time that organized religion, in particular Christianity, was not working for us. So we decided to walk away and embark on, and we have separate journeys that we both have embarked upon. So it's been great. It's been outstanding for me. And then, of course, I'm an advocate, as you can tell by the work that I've done and the work that we're doing today. I consider this to be advocacy work as well. So now let's get into it. First of all, let's define or let's identify who we consider members of marginalized communities. I could have just put one sentence up here and said anyone who's not a white heterosexual male, and that would pretty much guide everything. But I wanted to go into more of the details. Obviously, African Americans, others who are from the African diaspora, women who have been marginalized, members of the LGBTA plus community, and then other people of color. Specifically, why do I consider these people to be marginalized? Well, it's really simple. In the Bible, because we're dealing with Christianity, in the Bible, at some point in the Bible, Old Testament, the New Testament, the Bible condones mistreatment of people from each of these groups, whether it be people of color. If you're familiar with the story of Ham, white Christians through the enslavement of African Americans have used the story of Ham as a reason behind or rationale for enslaving African Americans. We know about all the stories in the Bible that show the mistreatment and misogyny of women. All of those stories, clearly we understand what the Bible says and condones about the mistreatment of those who are same gender loving individuals, and obviously other people of color. So to me, when we talk about Christianity, all of those groups fall upon what I consider to be marginalized communities. And so fast forward, and those individuals who are in power, who are carrying the banner of Christianity, especially westernized Christianity, they use the Bible scriptures to continue to marginalize many individuals in these groups. And so that's why they fall up under that category. Now, let me just make sure I get to the next one. So in what ways has Christianity been detrimental to marginalized communities? Well, I've identified 4, but there are many, many, many others. These 4 specifically came from my book, and I highlighted and talked about these subjects or these 4 categories in my book: finance, relationship, mental health, and social and cultural. And we'll get into each one of those individually and go into just more details. So I want to begin with mental health, the mental health aspect of it. I remember one of my earliest memories as a child in the Christian church was being told that I was worthless, and being told that I was born into sin, and being told that I was wretched. There's a very popular song, slipped my mind right now, but there's a very popular song that talks about we being wretched. And so I remember growing up, and I remember hearing this from every pastor, every sermon that I heard talked about how wretched we were. We were created from dirt, and that we were nothing without this belief in this God or this Jesus or any other deity. And so that mindset, that teaching of a child creates, I think, it creates mental issues within a young person. It sets up low self-esteem for many of us who go through that. Also, the stories of hell, the burning, the gnashing of teeth, the fiery burning hell that awaits those of us who are not believers. Those stories are told to young people, and the visuals that are shown of what hell looks like, or people who are suffering. All of that stuff is detrimental to the mental well-being of individuals, especially beginning with those of us who are kids. And we take that into our adult life. We also address the issue of how young girls are treated in the church, and how they're made to feel like that they're guilty of manipulating the misdeeds of some men. And so the church, a lot of churches, not all, but a lot of churches will protect pastors and deacons, and those of us who've been to or familiar with the Catholic Church, the priest, when they perform harmful acts upon young people, whether it be boys or girls. And the church will not only will they protect these individuals, but then they will flip it and make it seem like that the young person is responsible for the behavior of these individuals. And so again, that's harmful. And as we matriculate into adulthood, it becomes difficult for a lot of us to negotiate better relationships, and we're mentally scarred from what we learned and what we went through as young people growing up. And so, and also I remember as a child having a cousin who was born with a mental defect. And as opposed to my family seeking out professional help, they considered it to be something that was demonic, something that prayer would eventually fix. 40 years later, prayer has still not fixed this condition in my cousin. And I just remember now, as I became an adult, I just thought about what would have happened if my young cousin could have gotten the professional help that she needed at that particular time. But because my family were devout Christians and believed that this was some kind of demonic spirit, or believed that prayer was going to fix this problem. She's now has spent all of her life in an institution, which, believe it or not, was actually better than where she was before, because prior to that, my grandmother and my aunt would just simply lock her in a room in total darkness, and she spent the better part of her childhood locked in a room in darkness, and that just became, the way that you dealt with it. And they prayed and prayed and prayed. Those of us who are familiar with prayer and prayer studies, the Templeton Foundation, by the way, which is a really conservative organization, did a very famous study on prayer. And so, to make a long story short, they came to the determination that prayer really doesn't work. And so we know that those of us who are probably on here now, we know that prayer doesn't work. But unfortunately, prayer becomes the answer for a lot of us in a lot of situations that we go through. Um, I'm going to take the liberty of telling this story. My wife knows that I tell this story all the time, so she won't be disturbed if she hears this again. But a few years ago, my wife went through some mental health struggles, and we had been gone from the church for a couple of years. And my mentor, who, by the way, is a pastor who is a wonderful guy, an awesome guy, one of the best people I know, and my wife's mother, who is a very devout Christian, sort of got together and came to the conclusion that my wife was going through this because we had left, quote unquote, the covering of the church and the covering of Jesus. And so, being newly outside of the church, we reverted back to what we had both been taught for so many years, that the church was our safety net, that the church was our comfort zone. And so we reverted back to the church, sort of. I tell people all the time, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it is really hard to put it back in. But because this is what we knew and what we had become so accustomed to, we tried to go back, and we thought that going back was sort of help my wife's situation. So we go find a couple of churches. We go, my wife, every Sunday she's going to this women's group, and they're praying for her. They're putting hands on her. None of that is working. We're doing this for months and months and months. I finally reach out to my mentor, a pastor, and tell him. He invites us to his church. He said, listen, come to my church. I got some people really special. They're powerful in the name of the Lord, and they're going to help your wife. We get there. My wife is literally stretched out on the floor. They're doing whatever they're doing, hands on her. And my mentor walked up behind me and says to me, the reason why this is happening is because God wants you to be a speaker for him. And at that moment, I became so angry, because I said to myself, this so-called all-knowing, all-powerful God, you would think that he would know that the worst way to get me to do something is to harm the one thing that I love more than anything else in the world. And so I became enraged. However, I kept my calm. My wife and I went through this process. We continued on to another church, and we did this for months and months, maybe even a year. And my wife's condition never got any better. Finally, and my wife was in the health profession before we started our business, so she was a registered nurse. And so eventually, we said, you know what? Let's just seek professional help. My wife went out and found a secular professional in the field, got the help that she needed, and in a matter of weeks and months, she was back to her normal self. And this had gone on for almost a year. And so again, if we had trying to do what we had been taught for so long in religion, almost put us in a position that would have been almost impossible to come back from. There was a lot of stuff going on through my wife's ordeal, personal stuff, marriage stuff. It was very trying on our marriage, all of that. Something I had never experienced before. And so that sort of made me look at things completely different from that standpoint. So again, just to sort of touch on it, Christianity, really all religions, but because my familiarity is with Christianity, I know what Christianity can do and has done to those from a mental health standpoint. And so there's a lot more to that, but I want to go on to the next subject of finance. This is a big one to me because my background is in finance. And I spent 17 years as a financial advisor. And one thing I learned is the importance of a person's or a family's uh, faith practice on how they spend their money, how they allocate their financial resources. And so, in particular, in the African American community, this is huge. This is big. Um, Growing up, my mother, who was extremely poor, whenever she got her hands on some money, she would always try to pay tithes. And once I got to college and I felt I was old enough and big enough to to say something to her, because all throughout childhood I was just completely terrorized with my mother because she was very, very strict. Um, but I remember saying to her one day, you know, God understands that you need this money to pay your light bill. You know, why are you taking this money to the church every Sunday and receiving nothing? And my mother, bless her soul, rest her soul, she died with absolutely nothing after many, many, many years of seeding and giving money to the church. Um, in my book, I write about the finances, and I make a note in the book. There's a study that went on, and from 1980 to 2009, the African American community contributed $420 billion to the church in tithes. $420 billion. In 2006, just that year alone, African Americans contributed about $17 billion to the church. Now, I don't know how many of you listening have been in majority Black communities, but one of the things that is prevalent in those communities is churches. I mean, there's churches, as we literally say, there's churches on literally every corner. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and so I grew up around a ton of churches, and the community and the neighborhood never changed. As a matter of fact, the money that we gave to the church, whether it was tithes or whether it was billed as for the building fund, I never saw anything change within the church. And so the question I ask is $420 billion, what could have been done to enhance some of those communities, whether if that money had been redirected to nonprofit organizations or to help people learn computer skills or job skills training or schools or creating grocery stores within the communities with fresh food, healthy food. It's so much that could have been done with that $420 billion across this country in those marginalized communities. And we give the money is taken and the money is deposited into large commercial banks. And in many of those banks refuse to loan money to African Americans in those same communities. And so $420 billion with a B, with a B. And so I look at that and I oftentimes wonder what those communities could have done with that money. Um, Another example, I live in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Atlanta, Georgia, but there still is a pastor, but there was a pastor a few years ago who asked his church. He's a very well-known pastor. You've probably seen him on television, but he asked his church to contribute money so that he could afford and buy a $65 million jet. Now, let me explain to you. The community that this church resides in, the community that this church is in, the average annual income of the people in that community is about $27,000 a year. That is barely over the poverty line for a family of four. But yet, this minister is asking the church to provide enough funds for him to buy a $65 million jet. He is symbolic of what we've seen and what we continue to see in a lot of these mega churches and a lot of these ministers who are basically milking the community dry for their own personal gains. And according to the news here, he actually received the money. He, after a few weeks of asking, he stopped because it became such a big deal. He got so much pushback from those people outside of the church. But quiet is kept. He did receive enough funds to buy the jet. This is a minister who already owned a very large house, several very expensive cars, and so forth and so on, and has that sort of lifestyle. And so, again, the finances, I've watched not only my mother, but I've watched other people in the communities that I've grown up in. I've watched them take their last piece of money to churches because the pastor implied overtly or covertly implied that the more you give, the more you will receive. Words and phrases like you need to seed, you need to sow a seed so that you're blessed. And so many of these people, these churches take advantage of these individuals. They pay their money, and their personal situation, their social economics, their finances never, ever, ever change in these situations. My wife's grandmother, who's 91, up until recently, up until we found out, she was actually sending a check to televangelists every month or so. And she moved down to Atlanta with us, and now my in-laws are taking care of her, or were taking care of her. And then we found out that she was writing these checks to televangelists. And so she's just an example of millions of people across the country that do that, because what these churches try to provide or tell us or tell the members is that they're providing the hope. You're hopeless, we provide the hope. You're sick, we provide the medicine, so to speak. And so when you're in a position where you have nothing else, and the religion and your belief system and your God or your deity is all the hope that you have, you are willing to do anything that you think would get you what you need. And so these pastors and these people of the church take full advantage of that. And so again, we just want to be leery. I'm always leery of how our finances are spent and what's going on from that standpoint. Next, I want to talk about relationships. I oftentimes say to people when we have these discussions about how the church is detrimental to relationships that people may or may not have. I mean, the relationships that people engage in. And this is just not relationships with significant others. This is relationships with family members and people that you work with, your colleagues, whatever. First of all, when it comes to relationship with significant others, it has been my experience that the church creates unrealistic expectations within people and relationships. Let me be really, really specific. For the majority of my life as a Christian, I attended predominantly African American churches. Most of those churches are about 60% or 65% women and children. The men, the husbands, the boyfriends, whatever, they're usually home because we, and I put myself included, we tend to be really skeptical of pastors. We believe that a lot of those sermons are directed at the women because of the emotional aspect of it. We see the pastors, a lot of times, and not always, I don't want to generalize, but a lot of times, African American women tend to put pastors on a pedestal. As the men, we see them as other men because a lot of times when we're out doing the things that we shouldn't be doing, a lot of the pastors are right there with us. And so it is difficult to tell our women that, your pastor is not who you think he is. So what happens is that the women, they take the kids, they go to church. And so now the pastor is speaking to the women. Your husband or your significant other should be doing this, A, B, C, and D. And so when that woman brings that home, the last thing any man wants to hear is another man telling him how he should be running his household or the household that he lives in, right? And so that creates conflict. And so again, there's unrealistic expectations. We talk about how many church, and again, the Black church may be a little bit more guilty of this, how African-American churches are slower to come around to accepting the LGBTQ community. So again, that affects relationships. And it's funny because it's sort of a running joke in the Black church that the choir director and many of the men in the choir and now recently a lot of the pastors are closeted gay. They just haven't come out the closet. And so, but we tend to have a problem. We, again, generalizing, but I'm not talking about everybody, but we collectively, I should say, have a problem with openness about a person being homosexual or gay or lesbian. And so that affects relationships. When I talk to young people about why they're leaving the church, one of the top 3 reasons is, I have a friend who is gay, lesbian, or bi, and the church talks down about that. The church tells me that this person can't be my friend, or that I shouldn't associate with this person, or I myself is part of this community and I feel like I'm not welcome in this community. So again, you're affecting relationships. Even for those fundamental churches that are really strict about dress and appearance, young people, women, even men to some extent, but women who say, this is who I am. You should accept me who I am. They're criticized about how they may dress. Your dress is too short. I've attended churches where women couldn't wear makeup or jewelry. And so all of this stuff affects the relationships. The things that you hear in church telling you that, you shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that, that affects your relationship with other people. I have literally seen siblings quarrel and fight and relationships severed because one is in a church in a particular denomination and one is part of another denomination. My mother, who was Baptist all of her life, and my aunt, who was Jehovah's Witness all of her life, literally fought for 30 plus years, for the better part of 30 years until my mother passed away. Because they had these differences in the denomination. My mother would make jokes about Jehovah's Witness. My aunt would not talk to my mother because she wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. And so it was just a sad, sad, sad situation. And so again, the church detrimental to relationships that people share and try to have if we're not careful. And again, the protecting of those people in the church, those men in the church, particularly priests and deacons and pastors who do harm to young people in the church, and the protecting of those people in the church. And so I want to see. I am get back. I want to go to the next slide. And finally, social and culture. Part of what I mentioned earlier about the LGBT community falls upon what I consider social and cultural. But one of the things that I'm learning at Georgia State and working with a bunch of students who are between the ages of 18 and 25, and even in the master's program, there are some younger students. The culture is changing. And people are wanting to be, more accepting of those who may be different from them, not in just how they practice religion, but how they practice life. And a lot of the churches have not changed. They're really strict, and they have these foundational norms that don't change. And so people are saying, the question is asked, why are so many people running away from the church? Well, the church is not progressing along with society and culture. And so young people are saying, this person is my friend, regardless of their race, their gender, their sexual identity. And if the church is telling me that this person can't be my friend, or there is something wrong with this person, then I'm moving away from the church because I value my relationship with this person. It is part of my culture. It is part of who I am. And so I am not in the business of helping Christianity to survive, but, but I have said to my Christian friends, you really need to take a look of where you are from the standpoint of society and culture. It is my belief that westernized Christianity is the religious arm of white supremacy. And so if those issues are not addressed within westernized Christianity, again, the culture, you hear all the time about the cultural wars. Well, when we talk about the cultural wars, on one side of it are the fundamental evangelical Christians. And a lot of my African-American friends who are devout, I tell them, don't make a mistake. You are an evangelical. You might see a different, you might not think so, but the way you practice and the things that you talk about and your belief systems are as fundamentalist as they come. So you are an evangelical, my friend. And I say, and if you're not careful, if you guys are not careful, the next generation of churchgoers that you're looking for won't be there. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I participate, one of the things I'm doing right now, I am in the process of writing a paper with a professor of mine, and we are actually presenting that paper next month at the Academy of American Religion. It's the largest religious organization in the country. We're presenting that paper next month, and that paper is about nuns, not N-U-N, but N-O-N-E-S, which are individuals who are unaffiliated with church or with a particular religion. And we're talking about the tremendous growth of nuns. And so what has happened over the last 5 to 7 years is that African Americans, who have long been thought to be the most devout demographic in religion, are now starting to see a shift away from religion, and Christianity in particular, and Islam, into the category of nuns. And so we're talking about that. We're talking about why that's a shift. We're talking about why that's important to not just the African American community, the other marginalized communities, but for society at large. And so we're presenting that paper next month and talking about that. Those individuals under the age of 40, they make up they're about 30% nuns. And so they're the largest, quote unquote, they're the fastest growing, quote unquote, religious group right now. And for the first time in the history of this country, we are under 50% of people who regularly attend church. And so I know there are people out there, religious people, who say, well, just because a person don't go to church does not mean that they're not believers or they're not Christians anymore. But one of the things that I write, and it's part of my thesis within my thesis, is that I believe that when a person starts to identify as a nun, it is the gateway, it is the opening to that person and some of these people eventually becoming secular. And so, again, I tell my Christian friends, trust me, I'm not trying to help you, but here's the information. And so that's where we are on that. And so, again, the social and the culture part of it. And so what do solutions? When I say solutions, I don't mean solutions as in let's help organized religion. I mean solutions into those of us who have a different religious or spiritual journey. How do we keep our voices heard? How do we make sure that we're valued? And so one of the things I say is do what I'm trying to do, which create a safe space for those of us who are on this journey, whether it be through podcasts, or whether it be through books, or whether it be through organizations. Let's create a safe space with like-minded people, and let's bring our ideas together. Secondly, let's challenge some of these Christian norms. It's all right to say, you know what, I understand your belief, but that doesn't work for me, and that doesn't work for a lot of other people. So why should we have to abide by laws and norms that are established by those individuals who we don't have the same belief system with, right? And so that's another way. Again, established in the African-American community, where the church used to be the center of everything, we're going to have to establish other areas that are places where people can come together, as opposed to having the church. Same thing with our leaders. A lot of our leaders came from the church, but that's not going to be the case in the future. So we need to start looking for our leaders in other places. And then finally, we need to engage in constructive dialogue. I've gone through all of the stages when I denounced Christianity back in 2015, and now I'm at a stage where it's about, let's have this dialogue. Let's understand where we are. Let me explain to you my position, and I'm listening to your position. And where we can agree, let's come together and agree. And where we don't agree, let's agree to not agree and go about our separate ways. But let's be civil about our engagement. But mind you, I am going to engage in you with this dialogue because I think it's just that important. And so that is pretty much it for me. And then we have about 13 minutes left, 12 minutes left for questions and answers. That right there is a copy is what my cover of my book looked like, From Saved to Sane. You can if you're interested, you can pick that book up on Amazon. You can type in the title, or you can go by my name, use my name, Willie Cartwright. But it is a quick read, it's an easy read, but it is a very informative read. Those of you who may be academics, it is a lay book. My next book will be more academic minded, but this is a lay book because I wanted everybody to be able to read it and understand it, and get it. But it is incredible information in it. I cite all of my references, everything everyone I quote, their citation in there. You can find out where I got the information from. And so I'm ready for questions.
Our people are very interested in the paper that you are presenting, that you're working on with a fellow professor. People are wondering, is there a way they can attend that presentation? Or would you feel comfortable once it's done and published, sending me a copy that I can share with people. I don't know what the rules are around that.
Yes. I just found out the rules myself. The professor, one of my professors, his area of expertise is actually religion and mental health. But he is a former believer like I am. He's a Princeton and Emory grad. And so he and I sort of had this connection because we're both almost the same age. I'm actually older than my professor. And so he asked me if I wanted to work with him on this a few months ago. And I said, absolutely, because he knew where my interests lie. So the conference is in San Antonio, Texas. I think it's the weekend before Thanksgiving. Everything will be recorded. Our presentation will be recorded. What's more important is that the article itself will be published. And then once it's published, Janice, I will absolutely get you a copy or get you access to copies and so that you can send it out.
Thank you. Yes. And I was wondering if you have been influenced at all by Jeremiah Camara and the work that he has done.
Jeremiah and I, is a weird story. I have a friend and she does work in Africa. And I mentioned to her, because I haven't talked to her in a while, I mentioned to her one day that this was sort of the direction I was going in. And we talked about it for a while. And she says, I got this person that you should meet. And right off the top of my head, I said, if this is Jeremiah Camara, I'm going to scream. Because I had been following him in a lot of his stuff. She connected us. We had lunch here in Atlanta. And he's very careful about who he meets with because of the work that he's doing. And so he sort of explained it to me, but it was a fantastic lunch. I learned a lot of information. I actually quote Jeremiah in the book because he said, God is white because he's white in Walmart. And so I had to think for a minute, like what? And so we talked about it. And what he's saying is absolutely, because Walmart is the biggest retailer in the world. Our images are extremely important. And so even if you Google God now, you're going to get 99% of the photos are going to be European looking people, with the exception of Morgan Freeman. You know, you get a picture of Morgan Freeman playing God or whatever. But outside of that, for the most part, that's what you see. And so, yeah, Jeremiah's a wonderful person. We've texted a couple of times. I've sent him a copy of the book. So, yeah, I have been influenced by Jeremiah Camara.
Excellent. He has been a court speaker in the past, and I always appreciate his perspective. We had an interesting comment. Someone said, should we agree to disagree on human rights violations? And I think that is important. I feel like we walk a line when we are trying to have open dialogue with people who are still very entrenched in religion. And how can we have conversations with them around important things? It seems so hard sometimes to find what we can agree on. Do you have any comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I am. What's the word? Let me phrase like this. I am not nice when it comes to those type of things. I would not agree to agree. If it's human rights violation, then you're going to hear from me that is human rights violation. I'm not going to agree just because this is your faith and your religion. I'm not the person who says, let's respect all religions. Once your religion or the way you practice religion harms other people, then I have a problem. So that's just me. I'm not telling anyone else to be like that, but that's just me. I think it's time out for us being tolerant of a religion if they're using that religion to hurt other people. That doesn't work. That doesn't work for me at all.
Wow. Yes. And we see that going on in the United States right now with the rise of the Christian nationalists. And I think you're right on the money when you tie in, unfortunately, Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity with white supremacy. And it needs to be called out that way because that is what it is. And it's time for people to get out and vote and let their legislators know exactly what they think. Paul has asked, how can we support the distinction between the political role of the Black church in social and voting circumstances and the deleterious effect of the religious belief system on the Black membership of the church? That is such a big question.
It is a big question. And I think Paul one of the misnomers in the Black church is that we are a monolith when it comes to voting. I think it's more important for us as members of the Black community, and most of those members are churchgoers. I think it's important for us to focus on the policies that we think will help our community, regardless of which political party they're coming from. And so, for a while, for the longest, the majority of our people have supported a particular party without really asking, the question, what are we getting? And so why are we supporting this party, and what are we getting? And so I'm not saying vote one way or the other. I'm just saying that it's more important, or it should be more important, that we be concerned with the policies that are going to help us, as opposed to blindly voting for one party over the other, because this is what we've traditionally done, or this is traditionally what we haven't done, or whatever. And so I think we separate that out from, what's going on or not going on in the church. I can separate the two. In some ways, they can be connected, but I think as individuals, we have to be able to separate the two.
Wow. Yes. I'm wondering, so in our home here in Canada, we support the Mississippi Free Press. I wonder if there are any other groups that you would recommend, or resources for us just to learn more or to be supporting.
Yeah, there are. I'm a big fan of the Freedom from Religious Foundation.
Yes.
I was interviewed by them regarding this book. There's another organization. There's a Black non-believers organization here in Atlanta, which has headquarters all over the country. Mm-hmm. There are Black atheist groups, and I'm not, I don't like the labels, but what I'm pushing is that we support these organizations that think differently, that are free thinkers. And so, because we for so long have been a monolith in one way of thinking when it comes to religion, it's time to, open the door and have a lot of different trains of thoughts that come in, because I think it's beneficial to everyone. So those are just a couple of organizations that I'm supportive of.
Excellent. I love it. And CORT, Conference on Religious Trauma, is a big supporter of Freedom from Religion Foundation, and also Black non-believers. And it's been my pleasure to have representatives come and speak to us at CORT. And I'm so glad that you did too, Willie. It was really good to hear from you. Looking forward to your book. Definitely looking forward to your paper once it's published. Thanks for the work that you're doing. Really appreciate it. Okay, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And we're pretty much right on time. I'm just here looking for my glasses as usual.
Thank you all for being here. It just has been awesome. This has been awesome.
And hopefully, if I hear from people who are wanting to connect to you, how can I send them to you, or do you have a website that people can go to?
Yeah, I have. I have a podcast that I do every other Thursday that's called From Saved to Sane. YouTube podcast. We talk about religion, but there's some social and political stuff that gets involved too, because it's kind of all connected. It can also be reached direct email. You can send to me at W.O. Cartwright, my last name CARTWRIGHT @yahoo.com. The two easiest ways to reach me.
Wonderful. And From Saved to Sane is your YouTube channel.
Yep. From Saved to Sane is the YouTube channel. Yep.
Excellent.
And every other Thursday at 6:00, it's live. And we talk about, for about an hour, we talk about the issues centered around religion.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you for that. We are going to take a lunch break of half an hour. We'll be back here at 1:15 to hear from Erica Smith, and she's going to be talking about embracing queer identities after high control religion. Thanks, everyone. Do spend time in our exhibit booth, and I'll see you all again soon. Thanks again, Willie.
Thank you.